Well, hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Bob's Live, our weekly show right here on the internet. And, well, this week it is a little wet out as we have the remnants of what was the hurricane's name? Was it Ida? I don't know. It seems like it's always the hurricanes that are named after grandmas. They're like the really mean, nasty ones. That's my 2 cents. um, so yeah, today, this week, rainy week, not a great time to be outside. So let's do a live stream and kind of plan on warmer days and nice sunnier days. And of course, you can find us online over at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and we're also over on TikTok. And most of those places, it is at Bob's Market. On YouTube, it's a little bit different because Bob's Market was already taken, so it's Bob's Market Greenhouse. Which, yeah, that's why I tend to shorten it to Bob's Market. Gloria says yes, it was Ida. So yeah, old Ida coming in. She sounds like a meanie. This past weekend, before the rain hit, literally like right before, as soon as I got these picked, it started pouring down the rain down where I live. But this past weekend, I canned some grape juice. And I have grapes on my property, and I'm going to mention it in the video, but I don't really like how they're planted right now. The previous owner planted the grapes and kind of built, I wouldn't call it a trellis. I'm not sure what kind of structure they were going for. But yeah, it's not an optimal situation for growing grapes. So you'll see that cobbled together grape trellis. That was not me. But in this week's video, I wanted to show you how I can grape juice. And afterwards, I wanted to talk a little bit about grape trellises and grape trellis design. So we'll take a look at that after the video. So, well, let's jump right on into it. This afternoon, I am out here next to my house picking some grapes. And I'm going to be canning these grapes to make grape juice. Now, this grape trellis behind me, it's not a very good design. And it was actually put in before I bought the house. So over the next year or so, I'm planning on completely removing the grapes from this area and moving them over to where my garden is. So this has just been kind of a temporary structure over the last few years while I worked on remodeling the house. Alright, so I ended up with 2 colanders full of grapes. I've got that one and this one. Now I just need to go through and clean up the grapes because there's some bad ones in there. There's some that are underripe. Picking them, it's always a matter of waiting for more of them to be ripe, but that means more of them turn bad. It's always kind of a fine balance when it comes to picking grapes. So what I'm going to do is set up here and just start picking out the good grapes and moving them over to a colander here where I can clean them up and get them ready to go into jars. Now that I have the grapes clean, the next thing to do is add 1 cup of grapes per quart. And now to each jar, I add a 1/4 cup of sugar. And this you can kind of adjust to taste, so you could probably go as high as maybe 1/3 of a cup before it kind of got to be too much. So the next step is to simply top off the jars with water. And I'm going to go right up to the neck of the jar, and that'll leave, a little bit of headspace there. And I've seen different recipes for this, and sometimes it says to use hot water, but what I'm going to be doing is starting off from a cool canner and then bringing it up to a boil. So by doing that, I can save myself dealing with boiling liquids and just use some cool water here. Alright, so now I've got my lids hot and I've got the canner warming up. Now it's just a matter of putting the lids on, popping them into the canner. A little magnetic lid lifter like this works wonders. You'll have to go in and fish them out. Alright, got them in the canner, they're starting to warm up. Something you always want to make sure is that once you place your jars in the canner, that you can kind of give them a little wobble and they won't bang into each other. Once they start boiling, they really start vibrating. Now, when it comes to canning these, there's different recipes. Some of them call for hot water bath processing. Personally, I like to pressure can them just to be on the safe side. Now, the pressure canner that I use, it's one of the super simple jiggler type pressure canners. So it has this little weight that goes on the top, and the way you set the pressure is by adding or removing these little rings from the top of it. So by itself, this top is 5 pounds pressure. Then adding the next ring makes it 10 pounds. And then the next ring on that makes it 20 or 15 pounds. Yeah, 15. For the grapes, I'm going to be processing them at 5 pounds for 10 minutes. So here we have the finished grape juice right out of the canner, and you can see that the color has gone from the grapes into the juice. Now whenever I get ready to drink this, all that I have to do is strain off the grapes, and I like to dilute mine a little bit just so it's not quite as sweet and as strong. But here you can see this is the next batch that's going in, what it looks like before. So yeah, grape juices, super easy to can. And that is how I can grape juice. So it's a really simple recipe. And what I like to do is whenever I open up a jar of it, I'll take the jar and I actually use my my pour over coffee maker. It has a little strainer basket in it. I'll dump the jar into that, and that way I can strain out all the grape pulp, and then throw that away. But what I do is I dilute it with another quart of water, so that way I get a half gallon of grape juice. And for me, that's just the perfect sweetness and flavor for it. Uh, Another thing you can do is dilute it with some club soda, or what my grandma used to do is she would use some Sprite and kind of make like a little grape punch that way. Um, all of these are great options for this grape juice. And for me, it's one way that you can kind of stretch out the amount of grapes that you have. So with those 2 colanders of grapes, I ended up with 12 quarts of juice. And at the rate that I drank it, that'll last me well over a year. Uh, so yeah, it's a great recipe to do, especially if you don't have a huge grapevine area. So I only have 2 little grapevines, and that's what I got from that. But as I said in the video, that grape trellis isn't ideal, and I want to expand the number of grapes that I have and grow more. So I'm going to be moving my grapes. And in doing so, I want to go to a better designed trellis. So ideally what you want to do is sort of this type of design. Um, Back when I lived in my grandparents' farmhouse, this was the type of grape trellis that I built, and it worked great. One problem that the current setup is or has is that they built basically a box type frame. It's like a big rectangle. So all the grapes are just kind of growing in a big mound on top of it, which means that you have bunches of grapes that are in the center of that, and they're being shaded, so they're not getting good air circulation, and they're also not getting sunlight, which is really what they need to ripen. So only the grapes around the outside are ripening well. And that's why in the video you saw a lot of green grapes that should have been ripe. And it's due to poor air circulation, so I was fighting, different types of fungus all summer. I had to keep treating them with fungicide for that. And that's due to a lack of airflow. And then, yeah, also not good sunlight. So with going with something like this, let me get out of the way here so you can see. Let me swing that over. With going with a trellis system like this, which is more similar to what they use in a vineyard, you're able to get airflow in around it because you're basically growing the grapes in one plane. You have the cordon wire there, which you grow the vine up and then you prune it so it splits out and goes in 2 separate directions. And then your yearly growth grows off of that up through the catch wires up above, and that's what supports your fruit. And by doing that, you're able to allow airflow on to both sides of the grapevines, and also you allow sunlight to get in there. So it eliminates a lot of those fungus issues, and it also helps with even ripening. So you end up with something that looks more like this, which is a lot more pleasant to deal with. Another issue that I have with the system that the previous owner left me with is in the middle of it, there's no way for me to get up in there to weed it. So I've got weeds and junk growing up in there. I've mulched in around it before and tried to smother out the weeds that way, but really there's no way to get in around it. So by doing a single row like that, or doing a few rows, you're able to go down through and weed and kind of clean out the area. So, yeah, hopefully in the next few years, I'm going to have beautiful grapes like this. And with planting grapes, I forgot to include the image. Let me see if I can do some image editing real quick here. Okay, we're doing some image changing live. I had this one in the deck but didn't put it in. So here we go. Yeah, that went a lot smoother than I thought. So this is the typical progression if you grow that style. Now, this type of system here, they're actually doing basically 2 cordon wires, where I would use a single cordon wire. But generally it takes 3 to 4 years to get your grapes to where they can fruit and get, this type of setup. So this is the pruning progression that you would take. So you've got planted the first year. You get a little bit of growth in that first year, but not really enough to get it up to that first wire. Second spring, it looks like that. By the end of the next spring, you're up in that area, where you can start to train it onto that bottom wire. And then third spring, and I'm off the camera coverage. My arm just got chopped off there. And then you've got third and then fourth spring. So that's sort of the training route that you want to go, training and pruning. And ultimately you end up with this. But, it does take that investment of the first, 3 or so years to get up and running. It's the same with planting something like an apple tree. It's going to take, usually around 3 to 4 years of growth before you start to get fruit from an apple tree. So, same deal with grapes. And, well, that is grapes and grape juice and kind of what I'm planning. So you'll definitely see videos later on with me setting up the grape trellis. And the current grapevines, I need to trim those back and get them ready to be transplanted. Because I'm going to try to dig them up and move them to a new spot. Moving on, we've been having our virtual fair. And this past week was the last week for the virtual fair. And it was the livestock competition. And we had a few entries, and I've got to mail out their prizes, but here were our entries for the livestock. And you can check this out over on our website at bobsmarket.com. We had some cuties with the goats. They're always cute. And had a couple market hogs that were submitted. And then with poultry, we got these cute little chickies. Which in the person's email, they said that they were raised, to a full size, and then they took them to the fair. But they shared a cute little chickie photo with us. So keep an eye out, because from now until next year, if you're doing craft projects or anything like that, take a picture and save it and think about the virtual fair. That's something that we're definitely going to bring back next year. And, well, that is all that I have for this week. It was kind of a shorter episode. And, well, until next time, keep growing.